Hola amigos, hola amigas, welcome, bienvenido, croeso y salam, welcome to the channel y'all, Chest in the Action Mash. Today we have got my first car, a model of it anyway, 1.43 scale of the Vauxhall Cavalier. I believe this to be the third generation, I think. But yeah, there we go. So this is the first car I ever owned as an automatic back in the almost mid 90s. Okay, let's take this little beast out of the box. No screws for this one, just the car itself. So it was quite hard to get hold of this car, and I'm glad I did, because it's in exactly the same colour that my Cavalier was too. Now, when I first saw this car for sale, when I lived in North London, there was a garage, whoop, and off it goes. And I was absolutely smitten with it. They say once smitten, or what was the saying again? Once driven, forever smitten. Well, I definitely was smitten with this car. If it'll just stay on the ramp, that would be pretty cool if it could stay on there. So it cost me around £8,500 back then. So it was quite a lot of money. It was 2 years old. It was a J Reg. I can even remember the registration and everything. And I had it until 1997, until I moved abroad. And off she goes again. It wants to move. That's when I sold it, when I went to live in South America. But I'll always have a fond memories of this car. I absolutely loved it. It was automatic. It drove like an absolute dream. It was just absolutely beautiful. I think I said absolutely there too many times, but I really would love one of these today. You can still get them in good condition. I love watching the channel of the Scottish guy fixing up these Cavaliers and things, and I just absolutely loved it. It was amazing. It was so comfortable and quite fuel efficient, and everybody who drove in it as a passenger adored it, loved it. My dad even drove it a few times as well, because he really liked it as well. So if I could get this car again now, I absolutely would. I'd get it without hesitation if I could get one in good condition. Fantastic. So let me tell you a little bit about the Vauxhall Cavalier. Now, the Vauxhall Cavalier is a large family car that was sold primarily in the UK by Vauxhall from 1975 to 1995. It was based on a succession of Opel designs throughout its production life, during which it was built in 3 incarnations. The first generation of Cavalier, launched in 1975 and produced until 1981, was based on the existing Opel Ascona and Opel Manta, with a few minor visual differences. The predecessor to the Cavalier was the Vauxhall Victor, and the successor after this was the Vauxhall Vectra. The second generation of Cavalier, launched in 1981 and produced until 1988, was launched simultaneously with the identical new generation of Opel Ascona, which was sold across the world in various guises on the General Motors J car. The third and final generation of Cavalier, launched in 1988 and produced until 1995, was based on the first generation of Opel Vectra with the same production span. So this particular model was produced from October 1988 until October 1995, but it did have a facelift in 1992, which I don't like. It was either a 4-door saloon or a 5-door hatchback. By the mid-1980s, General Motors had started developing a new model to replace the J car models in Europe. Its American, Australian and Japanese divisions would instead be replaced by different designs in due course. By the end of the decade, the new model would retain the Cavalier nameplate for the Vauxhall version on the UK market, but elsewhere in Europe the car would be sold as the Opel Vectra, spelling the end for the long-running Ascona nameplate. Soon afterwards, development also began on a new coupe, which would share the same underpinnings as the hatchbacks and saloons, but would use a different nameplate and feature completely different styling. The final generation Cavalier went on sale 14th of October 1988 being Vauxhall's version of the Opel Vectra, again available as a saloon and hatchback. There was no estate version in the Opel lineup, and this design was not going to be sold in Australia. There was no prospect of Vauxhall turning to Holden for a replacement. Early plans for an estate model exclusive to Europe to be developed never materialised. During 1989, however, the Cavalier's floor plan did spawn a new coupe, the Calibra, the first Vauxhall coupe since the original Cavalier coupe was discontinued in 1981. The Calibra was the first official replacement of the Opel Manta, which had been discontinued in 1988 and was also sold on continental Europe under the Opel brand. Plans for the Calibra to be imported to the USA under the Saab brand never materialised. The Vectra name was not adopted at this model change, as Vauxhall feared reviving memories of the much maligned Vauxhall Victor, whereas the Cavalier was a generally well-received product and has helped boost Vauxhall's sales and reputation. Early Victors had been viewed in some quarters as excessively corrosion-prone, but the Victor was becoming a very distant memory by this stage. The Vectra name would eventually appear on a Vauxhall in 1995, when the Cavalier was finally replaced. In place of the Mark II's Cavalier's angular exterior was a more rounded appearance, reflecting the change in style and taste throughout Europe at this time. There was also a new economical 1.4-litre petrol engine. The biggest changes to the range were the addition of the 2-litre L 16-valve engines, better known as the Red Top or XE. This was fitted with the GSI 2000 and later SRIs. Also made available was a 4-wheel drive system fitted to all 2.0-litre models, 8-valve SRI spec, and on the version of the GSI 2000. Despite the lack of an estate body style, the Cavalier topped the large medium family car sales charts in Britain in 1990, narrowly outselling the Ford Sierra, while Rover was beginning to phase out its Montego in favour of the new Rover 400 series, and later the more upmarket 600 series. Other strong contenders in this sector included the long-running Citroën BX and Peugeot's highly regarded 405. Having first outsold the Sierra in Britain in 1990, it was Britain's second best-selling car behind the Ford Escort in 92. It did not lose top spot in its sector until it was overtaken by the Sierra's successor, the Mondeo, in 1994. The Vauxhall logo was added to the centre of the boot. Most of the range now had airbags and anti-lock brakes as standard, the first car in its class to do so, and all models were fitted with a toughened safety cage, side impact beams providing additional longitude load paths, and front seat belt pretensioners. This version of the Cavalier was the first Vauxhall to feature driver's airbag, with the passenger one being optional. This feature soon became available across the rest of the company's range. The exterior design was also freshened up, with a new look grille, headlights, rear lights and bumper mouldings, and an increase of sound insulation, especially in GLS and higher models, making the Cavalier a quiet place to travel in. In late 1994, the new 2-litre Ecotec engine was launched, replacing both the popular 8-valve C21 and high-performance 16-valve Red Top engine. The new engine had improved fuel economy and low-end torque at the cost of maximum power output. 136 horsepower compared to the 150 horsepower for the Red Top that it replaced. After 20 years and 3 generations, the Cavalier came to an end in October 1995, when it was replaced by the Vectra. Though sales continued for about a year afterwards, and several P-registered versions, August 96 to July 97, were sold. The third and final incarnation of the Cavalier was a big improvement over its predecessors, and most earlier Vauxhalls in terms of durability, with the rust problems that had plagued Vauxhall for years finally being conquered. This was reflected by the fact that Mark III Cavaliers were a common sight on British roads for well over a decade after the end of production. The demise of the Cavalier name marked a significant moment for the Luton-based company, as it would be the last of its main models with a distinct name from its Opel counterparts until the rebadging of the Opel Speedster as the Vauxhall VX220 and the Opel Karl as the Vauxhall Viva. All future Vauxhall models would share the names with those of Opel, or in the case of the 2004 Vauxhall Monaro with Holden. However, the Astra nameplate was chosen by Vauxhall at the beginning of 1980 for its version of the first front-wheel drive Opel Kadett, and from 1991 General Motors decided to sell the Opel version of the car as the Astra. This version of the Cavalier shared its chassis with the Saab 900 that was produced from 1993 until 1998 and continued until 2002 as the Saab 9-3. A total of more than 1,800,000 Cavaliers were sold in 3 generations and a 20-year production run, making it the 5th most popular car ever sold in Britain. Following its launch in October 1975, the original Cavalier took time to gain ground on the British market, with just under 30,000 sales, placing it as the 13th best-selling car for 1976. It climbed to 8th place the following year with more than 41,000 sales, peaking at 7th place in 1978 with over 55,000 sales. It was still the 7th bestseller in 1980, though sales for that year had dipped back to just over 41,000 as the economy entered a recession. Well over 200,000 were sold in total over a 6-year production run, but by the end of 2009, just 373 remained, and it had been a rare sight on British roads even by the mid-1990s. The Mark II Cavalier was a much bigger success. In 1982, its first full year on sale, just over 100,000 were sold in Britain. This placed it as Britain's 4th best-selling car, putting just 35,000 sales short of its key rival, the Ford Cortina, which was replaced that autumn by the all-new Sierra. The Mark III Cavalier enjoyed similar popularity to its predecessor. Launched in October 1988, Cavalier sales from 1989 stood at 130,000, including some Mark IIs, as it was Britain's 4th best-selling car overall, while the Sierra stood second with more than 175,000 sales. But in 1990, it edged ahead of the Sierra into 3rd place, and by 1992, it was Britain's 2nd best-selling car with nearly 110,000 sales, the lower figures being the result of the recession at the time, while sales of the aging Sierra had slumped to less than 80,000. The Sierra's successor, the Mondeo, overtook it in 1994, but even in the Cavalier's last year of production, 1995, it still managed nearly 74,000 sales, despite being replaced by the Vectra in October 1995. By February 2016, just over 4,500 Cavaliers across all 3 generations were still in use on Britain's roads, with most remaining examples being Mark III models. More than 1.8 million had been sold there. And so there we go. That is a little bit of history behind it. And this Vauxhall Cavalier that I had will remain in my heart as the best car I've ever owned. I absolutely loved it, like I said in the very beginning. And yeah, it has a very big part in my heart and memories. Oh, there was so much fun. It was when I lived in London at the time, so this was my car that I'd be driving around London with and back and forth home to South Wales, and that's about as far as it went, actually. And I really felt the dog's doodahs when I was driving this car. It was absolutely amazing, and I would love one. They were like stinking fish. They were absolutely everywhere, but it's very rare to see one now. And I think that even if these were produced exactly as they are there, now they would give cars a run for their money on how comfortable and just how spectacular they were. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just think that they were so ahead of their time when they came out. When I had mine, it was just ahead of its time. And I absolutely loved it. And I miss it all the time. So there we go, guys. There's a little bit of history and my personal feelings on my first car that I ever owned was this gorgeous Vauxhall Cavalier. And I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you for the next episode. Bye. Oops.